for us here in Wakefield. So just to provide a very quick overview for those that aren't aware of the current reporting within various news outlets across the UK, but we have seen over 11,000 people, including children, share their experiences anonymously in the main around sexual harassment, abuse and sexual assault on the Everyone's Invited website. So this campaign began last summer as an Instagram account on social media, and it evolved into a website recently. And it then provides a platform for people to share those experiences. Albeit they are providing those experiences anonymously, that the platform does enable, where it has been an educational establishment, to be part of where that harassment or abuse has taken place, allegedly, being named. What has come up though in terms of challenges is that due to the anonymity, it's been difficult for educational establishments to identify those children that have been affected. And so in light of what has come to fruition this week, we as a Safeguarding Children Partnership are seeking to understand the current offer in Wakefield for children, for educational staff, and the governance in place to check and assure in relation to the prevention and the support that is available to young people. So I am proposing, committee, that this presentation is circulated for information, because I will just provide a very brief commentary around what is already in place in Wakefield and what are the next steps. And I'm sure all will appreciate that this is a very live issue and it's something that we need to consider further. But in terms of what is already in place for children, so we have relationship health and sex education. That was introduced as a statutory requirement for all schools to deliver as part of their curriculum at the start of this year. Most schools, however, have had this in place since September 2019. So in most schools, it has at least been in place for 2 years now. And for those schools that didn't kind of voluntarily adopt the curriculum, that was made a statutory requirement from September 2020, and those schools have been supported by the Education and Inclusion Service through the school improvement advisors in rolling that curriculum out to children. We also have the Healthy Relationship Ambassador training, which is investing in children themselves to become ambassadors, that they can then spot the signs around unhealthy relationships, but also be able to educate from a peer-to-peer model around what healthy relationships look like, and then be able to be that link from a peer perspective in schools, that should any escalation need making to designated safeguarding leads and head teachers, that is a pathway there. We also have the 0 to 19 Healthy Child Service through the school nursing provision, and that's in place for children to provide a range of information that school nurses provide, and that does include bullying, sexual health, contraception, mental health and emotional well-being. Furthermore, we have the Spectrum Community Health Service that deliver a targeted respect programme to children in schools on healthy relationships. The programme unpicks healthy, unhealthy relationships, understanding influences and power, the use of social media, child exploitation, consent and trust as well. We also have an offer readily accessible through West Yorkshire Police that provide, again, targeted workshops in schools on sexting and the law. And we have as well in place in Wakefield a harmful sexual behaviour panel, so whereby those children who have been identified as potential perpetrators in carrying out sexual behaviour, or where it's been identified that some of the presenting presenting signs around sexual behaviour need further support, there is a pathway in place in Wakefield where schools and services can refer that child through to that panel, which is multi-agency, that can determine what appropriate support needs to be provided to that child and that family around that area. In terms of what's in place for staff, so we have the risk and resilience framework that public health lead on. That is very much around a training model that provides school staff to determine safe and unsafe situations, understand and pick up on the risks and consequences of risky behaviour, establish and negotiate age-appropriate boundaries, and to understand the risks of the online world around modern technologies. And we have readily head teacher and designated safeguarding lead forums. They are run across different areas of the service in Wakefield. So in my area with the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, we have a dedicated education safeguarding advisor who runs quarterly DSL forums, and we also have the education inclusion service within the local authority who provide input around those DSL forums in terms of good practice, emerging safeguarding needs, as well as the opportunity to share any concerns that schools are picking up on as well. We have a really extensive offer for staff in place around safeguarding. That is provided in the main by a member of my team, the education safeguarding advisor, that we have got relationships with all schools, so including our independent, our academies and our maintained schools across the district who access the training from a designated safeguarding lead perspective to governors training, and that training includes all the information that you would expect schools needing to have in place around those general referral pathways into support, and then training on specific topics such as harmful sexual behaviour. We also have governor training and network meetings as well. And that is very much of the same ilk as the school safeguarding training, but it very much looks at supporting governors to understand their role and responsibilities around safeguarding arrangements in schools, and that again includes around the responses to harmful sexual behaviour. What we have sought assurance on is that the education inclusion service that runs the governor training network meetings will be having some dedicated time at the next governor network meeting later on next month in May around relationship health and sex education. And then just to finish up, what do we already have in place to check and assure? So in the news that broke late last night and this morning, Ofsted have communicated that they will be looking at reviewing all schools' safeguarding policies as a matter of urgency, which I think has been clearly from the back of the Everyone's Invited campaign. We are anticipating, therefore, that schools will be needing support around potentially around their safeguarding policies, where there may be some gaps that Ofsted highlight either on an individual basis or thematically. That will be picked up by my team, and there will also be crossover with the education inclusion service. But more generally as well around Ofsted, that they will, as part of their inspection, will inspect safeguarding arrangements, and that will include the management of allegations of harassment, assault or abuse. And should Ofsted receive reports from pupils or parents directly, there may then be a prioritisation of inspection from that school. And what we have in place locally around Check and Challenge is that we have an annual safeguarding school audit that all schools engage with, all 140 plus, that we oversee as a Safeguarding Children Partnership. And schools within the last audit cycle did report through their self-assessment around being fully compliant in the rollout of relationships, health and sex education curriculum to children. What they did identify, which I think is something that we as a partnership will have in consideration, is that clearly the pandemic has meant that there has been challenges around delivering the curriculum right across the board, and there has then been a need to prioritise those core subjects as well. So schools have flagged up in that respect that there have been some challenges around that rollout for this year in respect of the pandemic. So in terms of next steps, we as a partnership feel that we do need to review this further, and that will be taken to our executive to look at this in more detail and to look at carrying out a review around what is already in place, as I've just given a run through, and where there are some gaps that we do need to ensure that are in place to support and protect our children in the district. What we do need to do as well is liaise with those operational leads within this area. Given that it's Easter holidays at this moment in time, many of our support staff around school, so with the school improvement team and a member of my team, the education advisor, is currently on leave this week. So we have prioritised meetings when they return from leave, again to look at what does that support need to look like from schools. Do we need to do any kind of specific assurance work as well? So just to kind of, I suppose, get across finally that this is very much a live issue. We are looking at this as a priority, and it will be something that the Safeguarding Children Partnership will take forward from here. And I will leave it there, Chair, if I may, and happy to take any comment or question, but I'll make sure that Lynn has got the copy of these slides so it can be circulated for members to read outside of the meeting.
Oh, thanks for that, Jonathan, and thanks for coming, at such short notice to speak to us on what is potentially a very difficult area, actually. All I can say is I'm just really pleased to hear that we've got such a sort of strong management system that we can come up with this so quickly, but also recognise the challenges that will be ahead for the department. I don't know if anybody has got any questions to ask about this at this stage. It looks like, Andy, you've got a question that you'd like to put. Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Very, very briefly. I mean, I haven't seen the screen, but I've listened to what you've said. The implicit in all these structures is the expectation that children and young people will be able to disclose and share. But I think the reason why there's been such an impact with this everyone's invited is because it seems surprising to people that there's been such an extent of abuse within this context. And so for me, it's really, yes, we need these structures, the management within schools and elsewhere, but what are we actually doing to enhance the quality, the contribution of the student voice, the pupil voice, the children's voice? Because clearly that's where the issue has been.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Andy, and I think as part of the work that we will take forward as a partnership is very much around, as you mentioned there, the young person's voice. We do have a very good and well-established youth voice arrangements in Wakefield through the Build Our Futures Forum. There was a quarterly meeting that took place actually last week, and I have had conversations already with Elaine Armstrong, who leads the Build Our Futures work for us in Wakefield, around looking to meet once after the Easter break to look at that around the children's voice and making sure that we feel that we have young people cited on this work locally in Wakefield. They themselves are able to provide that that anecdotal evidence, experience, and also to be part of that check and challenge around those arrangements that we have in place. Because as you say, the arrangements that we have in place, are we assured that they are robust enough? And I think that this is where we do need to take this work on further to assess that we'll be able to do under the auspices of the partnership, but certainly using the Youth Voice Influence Group that we have here in Wakefield to help ensure that we do keep and maintain that voice of the child.
Thank you. Because clearly we've had for years, we've thought that we've got systems and structures in schools and elsewhere, and we felt quite reassured to some extent by that. But the fact that this has been such a surprise and a shock means that we need to, and you've described it, need to reevaluate just how secure and resilient our systems are, and we need to reevaluate all of it. So it's not a surprise anymore. We know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for that important comments that you've made there. Cynthia, I don't know if you'd like to ask your question. Oh, she's saying she's changed her mind. So I don't know if you want to make any comment at all, Cynthia. No, I don't think so. Right. Okay. Yes, it was a lot of good points that you made, Andy. And one of the things I'd written down was what's happening at practitioner level, and will there be more dedicated staff time at that level to work with children directly? So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add at all, Jonathan.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Loughran. So I think that that will be part of the review of these arrangements. I think, just feeding off the point that Andy made, I don't know if there's any way as of yet from the Everyone's Invited website whereby we're able to locally see, of those 11,000 testimonies that have been supplied and provided rather, how many of those are applicable to us in Wakefield. Now, I'd suggest that there must be, because what we're picking up on right across the UK, that all areas are seemingly being affected. But I think it's part of that review work, and part of the review work will be then assessing the arrangements that we've got in place around the robustness, where there are gaps that within existing structures we are not able to fulfil. There would then be discussion around if we do need to look at additional capacity, whether that's from an individual school perspective or more so from those services that support those schools, so the likes of the Safeguarding Children Partnership, Education Inclusion, and some of those other kind of wraparound support services. So I think initially we just need to carry out a stock take of what this looks like for us in Wakefield. We know that we've got a lot of arrangements in place at this moment in time, but as Andy's alluded to, they've been in place for a long time. We need to review those and assess where, if any, there are gaps that we do need to look at. So I think that will be part of that wider review work.
Right. Okay. That sounds good and promising. So thank you very much, Jonathan. We've got no more questions, so I think we'll just say thank you, and we'll move to the next item, which is number 7 on the agenda, transition to adulthood. And I think Stephen Crofts, you're going to take us through this one with a number of other team members. Is it Eamon Mohans and Julie Cayley and Kerry Seaston?
That's right, Councillor Loughran. So the next agenda item is focused on transition and preparing and supporting young people for adulthood. And as you've said, I'm joined this morning by colleagues from children's services. Eamon Mohans, who heads up our youth support service, Julie Cayley, heading up our inclusion services, and Kerry Seaston, service manager within our children in care service. Now we have a presentation which my colleague on the call, Emily Wood, will present for us. James or Lynn, I don't know whether Emily needs permission. I think she's put a note that she needs permission to present the PowerPoint. Okay, so I can see that, and hopefully colleagues on the call can see the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, it's with us. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, next slide, please, Emily. Okay, so just to set the scene, the purpose of this input and presentation to overview and scrutiny is to share with colleagues and committee members the work that's taking place across the partnership, across the children's services, across the children's system, to prepare young people for their transition to adulthood. So this morning is very much about us being able to share an overview of the work that's underway. We want to focus in on I guess, vulnerable groups in a bit more detail through this morning's presentation, and to think in particular about the work that we're doing again across the partnership to prepare children in care, children with special educational needs, and young people that are within the criminal justice system, in particular the work we're doing there to prepare and support their transition to adulthood, and the support they receive through as they move into receiving support through adult services. I guess in terms of setting the scene, what's really driving a lot of the overall aim here and our thinking here is very much to avoid what's often, when we're thinking about transition and preparing for adulthood, what's often referred to as that avoid a cliff edge, avoid a situation where services might abruptly stop at 18. So that we're very much wanting to talk to you about how we're working to prevent that cliff edge within Wakefield, and how we're working across the system and across the partnership, in particular with vulnerable young people, to ensure that support continues beyond 18 for vulnerable children and young people. You've heard me say a number of times this is about a partnership approach, and the oversight for this work, where in terms of partners within Wakefield, we come together to assure ourselves that services are working well, is within our Children and Young People's Partnership Board, is as part of our safeguarding partnership arrangements, but also in terms of the cut across with health and wellbeing services, the alignment to the integrated care partnership and the oversight there, those partnerships that we have in place. So just the next slide, please, Emily. As we move through the discussion and the presentation today, you'll hear that in a number of areas where we're supporting vulnerable young people, we've got some robust and improved pathways of support. So colleagues will tell you a bit more about our work for young people, children with special educational needs, and care leavers. I guess at the heart of all of this, at the heart of getting this right, is strong partnership working, is early planning, early information share to support transition. And we've got the note there, and we've heard earlier in today's meeting that some of the arrangements that we're developing and putting in place across the district through our Wakefield Families Together programme, our team around the school meetings, our school our school inclusion panels, are all very much around making sure we're planning ahead, we're thinking early, we're identifying where children and young people will need support as they progress into adulthood. And those forums, those early conversations allow us ways to ensure plans are robust and in place. So the next slide, please, Emily. Just to mention, we'll move into the area of youth justice, special educational needs, and children in care in a moment. But we also have some older children, 16 and 17-year-olds, that are supported through our early help services and our children's social care services. Children that may be subject to an early help plan or a child in need plan. And I guess here, again, just to emphasise that the approach is very much to involve partners early, to put in place plans early as part of transition planning, and the work that we do with our health partners as part of this, very much about ensuring that when those children reach 18, that there is a clear transition plan in place. And I guess one of the things just to mention here, that our early help service, our children's social care service, will take a flexible approach where needed, and extend support beyond 18 as part of transition planning. Okay, next slide, please, Emily. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Kerry, who's going to talk a little bit more about the work we do to support children in care.
Hello, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. A lot of people haven't met me, and I haven't met a lot of people, so forgive me. But I've been in role since July, and just to focus on this, I think this was a significant part of the service that did need the focus on, because we do a lot in children in care, and we've got a lot of agency involvement. However, what we are preparing our children for is adulthood, and a lot of our children are extremely vulnerable. So we've put a lot of things in place to make sure that these children don't slip through the net, and that we are meeting their needs as early as possible. So what we've got in place at the moment is we've got several arenas where children are scrutinised, their plans are scrutinised, their placements, their needs, physical and emotional, and you can see on the slide that a couple are named. So we've got complex care panel, whereby a lot of our young people do have a lot of emotional and physical needs that will require a transition to adulthood. That is actually chaired by our head of service, and often the social worker, along with the team manager, will present and talk about the children and give an oversight of the future permanency plans. The same, it's a very similar panel, but it's the permanency and resource panel, and that talks about all different kinds of permanency panel, including adoption, residential. Children there are taught in detail about their presentation, their competencies, their traumas, and again that has head of service oversight, and permanency plans and recommendations are put forward in that panel, which takes both these panels take place on a weekly basis, and the children continue to get reviewed for a significant period of time, and it could be that sometimes they're not brought back for a certain amount of months, and part of the action would be to if the child is approaching the 15-16 age, is that a transition referral form is completed for an adult social worker. So I suppose in a way those two panels are where we really do pick and make sure that our children are not slipped through the net. There's also, before we go to the panels, there is also other areas where we identify children. We have a lot of children coming through from the locality teams, and I think it's fair the children have gone through care proceedings. That's the focus. The focus is on their long-term plan. And by the time they come over to us, things are kind of a little bit calmer. We can get to know the child a little bit further. So I think it's fair to say through staff supervisions with the team managers, they talk more holistically about the child's needs. So often we find that we're already there thinking about what kinds of support they will need post 16 coming up to 18. So we're already thinking about independence, looking at relationships, health and well-being, and how that will look post 18 and what kinds of support they will need. We've got a very, very good transition process that's took a lot of work with Leaving Care, i.e. Next Steps. They are working on a transfer protocol at the moment with adult services. So although we're drivers of making sure we make referrals to adult services for our 16 plus, we do that in collaboration with our excuse me, with our care leaving service, and often with the PA. So it is a joint transfer protocol. So that means then when we do take a step back at the age of 18, but the PA is involved, the PA will have all that information relating to that child, so it's not lost. So there's continuation of knowledge about the needs. I do know, and I haven't put it on here, I am speaking with Emma Pye at the moment. I speak with her a lot, And one of the things that we've highlighted is our young people post 18 that not necessarily need CAMS intervention, but need some kind of support. So we're doing something at the moment around that. And I know our EWBT are working with some over 18s to make sure that they get the adult support there. With the CVE team, we have a lot of work that's done by the CVE. Oh, what's a PA? Sorry, it's a personal advisor. I do apologise. I am really sorry. The CVE team is for the children's exploitation, and they often work with our younger children around risks of sex and violence, risk of county lines, and they are agreeable to working with a young person post 18. I think it all depends on what level of support that young person will get.
Thank you very much. I presume that's the end of your input for the moment.
It is, yes.
Yeah, it was Kerry, wasn't it? I did get it right, didn't I?
No, you did, Councillor Loughlin.
I charged off to get my biro, and then I sort of didn't know if I'd heard right. So
no, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can I just, is it okay for me to ask something now, or do you want to carry on with the presentation as a whole?
Please do.
I was just wondering really about the amount of resources you've got to work with, because I'm very concerned about the quality of the mental health support that's given, and sometimes it can be sort of, well, in my past experience, it was always a bit on the fragile side. But I'm hoping that you're going to say that there are enough resources now to offer young people what they really need.
Yeah. I've got to say, I can give pre-16 and post-16. So I've got to say we've got a really good emotional wellbeing set up, not just with our emotional wellbeing team. We're doing a lot of SDQs. What we do, minimum yearly SDQs, which feed into our emotional wellbeing team. They then will pick up the young person and deviate who's going to be doing the actual scheme of work with this young person, whether it be the social worker, whether it be CAMS, whether it be the EWBT team. I think it's fair to say we're quite proud of that service. It's working really, really well. We do provide a really good service to the young people. Post 18, we have got a good CAMS adult mental health. But there is certain areas or certain pockets of children that we have that don't actually meet the CAMS adult remit, and that's where I'm working with Emma Pye at the moment and the EWBT to see how we can actually provide more emotional support to our young people that are 18 years and over and need that support and probably haven't got the family links, and essentially they need that kind of future work. So we are working on the 18 plus, but I've got to say for the under 18s we've got an excellent service in place.
Great, that's really good to hear. So I'm just wondering, Andy's got a question to ask, so perhaps you'd like to come in, Andy.
Thank you very much indeed. One of the things that has come about in the last few days has been the fact that with this everyone's invited, we thought to some extent we were fairly comfortable, maybe is the wrong word, but we felt we had all structures in place, and then we're suddenly surprised and shocked, and we've had a big discussion about that. And one of the questions is we need to reevaluate. You've mentioned, the presentation so far has mentioned the fact that there's excellent service, and I've no doubt at all that there's a lot of quality, but it's about how do we know? Because with regard to the service, the only way we're going to know is in the long term, how are these young people going to turn out as adults and grow with regard to family and employment, etc. And I'm just a little bit apprehensive about the fact that whereas the service and the structures that you've described may well be excellent, how do you actually know that they're doing the job that they should be? Because it's about the children themselves and the young people themselves, and we've just found out, haven't we, that disclosure is such a difficult thing. What is the service itself may be wonderful, but how are we sure that we're actually meeting the need?
Okay, Andy, I suppose this is a wider context, and I can only talk about children in care. I'm sure you can appreciate I'm the children in care service manager, so I can only really focus on the children in care. We have a QA system in place, which obviously looks at the quality of emotional well-being service that we provide to our young people. We also, since taking over the service, we've seen a massive reduction in children's crisis and the intervention work we've needed to do with the young people. And that is actually attributed to the fact that we've got a robust now social work service in place. We've got nearly all permanent workers in place. They're all very experienced workers. We've got very little inexperienced social workers within our children in care service. So there is a lot of work going, intense work with the children. We're doing regular TAC meetings, so there's continuous discussions around the children. I often have we have regular meetings with MPI, and we look at the certain children. We've also got the Mind of My Own app that we're looking at the outcomes on that. I think it's fair to say I absolutely appreciate what you're saying. I can say we're doing this, this and this, but how do we measure it? I'm only looking at the children within my service, and I've seen, like I say, a dramatic reduction in their behaviours, in some of the complex behaviours. I feel that there's better relationships with social workers. SDQs, we look at the SDQs because obviously we redo those. Those actually repeat similar questions, and we tend to try and use that as a fluid document. So if a young person is feeling like with school, with everything around school at the moment, I know there's massive issues about young people, how they're feeling. We will do an SDQ, and we will do a follow-up SDQ to measure how that child's feeling now, post intervention or post just different time frames. So every time a child changes, we will do a strengths and difficulties questionnaire. A strengths and difficulties questionnaire, and that actually gives us a good basis to determine how the support is impacting the relationships, the support around that child. Because I think it's fair to say that a lot of the emotional support that child actually gets is not just from our mental health services. It actually comes from their caregiver, it comes from the social worker, it comes from health professionals, it comes from the Children Care Council. There's all different areas. So I suppose for me, we do have a Q&A system. We regularly do the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. I know the EWB team are actually focusing on the outcomes of their work, and I'm sorry, I can't talk for them. And like I say, I'll look at the actual service and where it was at and how it's at now. Does that answer your question? I hope it does.
Yeah, thank you. My concern really is going to become evident, I suppose. It's down the line, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
Children have become adults, and how much feedback we can get, whether or not we actually did a good job with them, and what they would suggest is now that they've grown, what could be done in a different way. It's such a difficult area to work in. I fully appreciate that, but this everyone's invited thing has opened people's eyes to the fact that disclosure is such a difficult thing for young people.
It is, and I think it's fair to say as well, Andy, just to get in on that, is that all children are not prepared to disclose at certain ages. Even as adults, sometimes they're not prepared to admit. But I suppose in a way, us as parents, and we do work very much with our children as parents, we're very passionate about our children, and us as advocates, I think it's very, very reasonable to expect that if there is a team around that child, we will be able to have an idea of how that child's feeling with certain behaviours. We have a gut instinct if that child has actually been completely open and honest about it. And I suppose in a way it's about relationship building, about making sure that we do everything possible. And I think it's about team managers working with social workers. We have a lot of peer support. So we're doing a lot of life story work. That's our focus at the moment, to make sure the child does know and has a positive sense of the self. We're focused on activities. We're focused on sleep, diet, all the things that would help a child or a young person to feel better about themselves and help them establish relationships that will go on to work for when they're 18. and over.
Okay, I'm just a bit aware of time, and I'm aware that we've got another presenter. We've also got some questions coming up, actually.
Oh, no.
Some of them are, it's great, Kerry. All this is absolutely fabulous. I love it. But there's Cynthia's made a comment, so it's a question actually I think she wants to ask, and also I'm aware that Stephen is wanting to make a comment as well. So could we sort of move on now to Cynthia's question?
Yeah, the emphasis seems to be very much about young girls. What are the ratio? If I've led that to, in my conversation, I'm really sorry because it's not. I think it's fair to say that, I think boys and girls are very different. And it's about how you work with the girls and boys. But I think it's very equal in terms of mental health. I mean, we've got, I suppose it's for boys that we have got for girls, but at the same time they do interlink, and often they're the same for our own children. They're very common themes that we're hearing, and this is how we're addressing. So I would actually say we haven't really looked at the ratios of girls to boys, but I think it's fair to say across my service anyway, I would think it's very equal. We're having, we get a lot of discussions with young boys. I think they're more open about their feelings now and able to talk, but I think the same can be said about young girls as well. So yeah, I'm sorry if I haven't answered that properly, but
I think that's fine, actually. I think that's a good answer. And I'm just wondering if we can move to Stephen.
It was just a quick comment, really, Celia, to pick up on what you said a few minutes ago. I'm just conscious of the time that we've been allotted for this agenda item, probably beginning to run over. So
sorry, we need to push on.
Perhaps invite a shift of focus and think about children and young people with special educational needs, and move to the next slide with Julie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try and get through this fairly quickly, and I'll keep my eye out for questions as we go along. So I'm Julie Kelly, so thank you for the invite to the meeting. And I'm talking around special educational needs. So, and just giving you a bit of an overview around the work that's going on around transition in this particular area. So we do work in partnership with parents, young people, as well as settings and professionals to ensure that work is taking place to identify any support needs, to ensure that we continually assess and so that we can do some timely transition work in order to meet the needs of our young people, and so that we can ensure as well that we're always focusing on resilience and building that resilience as they go through their lives and become adults, because that's really important as well. So one example of that is we've got the Preparing for Adulthood, PFA, as I will refer to it, coordinator is going to talk to secondary head teachers around outcomes around PFA in the next few weeks as well. One of the teams that comes under my remit is the complex care needs team. So that's a social work team who work really closely with the adults transition team. And so we put forward young people for an adults assessment from the age of 16. They tend to get picked up around age 17. And we ensure that solutions and a smooth transition takes place. So quite often that what we might do is if somebody comes into our services at, say, age 17, what we'll do then is we'll work with adults right from that point in time. So what we're agreeing with them and the support we put in place can stay in place once they turn 18 and transition into adulthood. So we're not trying to move placements all the time or move provision all the time. We work very closely with adults to make sure that that can happen when it's appropriate to do so. Building into that, we do joint supervisions with the more complex cases, again with adults, to ensure that they're fully aware of the complex nature of some of the young people and what will be needed and what their anxieties are or what their families' anxieties are, and try and deal with all those, remove any barriers and make sure that we've got those relationships built before the young person is an adult. And the complex care team also do referral into the next steps, which is the care leavers services, which we've kind of discussed as well. And that's around a personal assistant for all children in care. We we identify through a number of different ways. So we have an education, health and care panel, which takes place weekly. I've been in that this morning, which we also identify any young people in there that we think will need a referral to adult services. And adults sit on that panel as well now. So we have the agenda is set out. So we'll do all the kind of year nines and above at a particular point where adults are sitting in there. So we get to know the young people, and they get to know the young people, and we're planning for the future about what their aspirations are, how we can support their journeys into adulthood and the work that they do. You can just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, we work really closely with schools, particularly the special schools. So I have meetings with special school heads on every 2 weeks, and they'll support referrals into adult services as well. And we also work obviously with the mainstream settings as well, because many of our young people with an education, health and care plan won't meet the criteria for adult services. So we need to be thinking about how we support those journeys into adulthood, what we're doing with them, what pathways are available, and making sure that that's really robust as we go through that. We have got, in order to help that, we've got a transitional pathway plan with supporting guidance, which is in the process of being implemented, and it's found on the local offer. We've worked on that with parents and carers and young people, and there are also supporting documents as well that SENCOs and parents and carers can use, which again completely has that focus on the preparing for adulthood and what things will be needed for their child and young person in the future. We've also done some linked in with that. We've done some training around outcomes for preparing for adulthood, and we've done some regional training. And I'm really pleased to say that we had a real good buy-in to that training from people across the Wakefield district as well. That only took place in March and was really successful, and that was delivered by the national team around preparing for adulthood. We're working on producing really to really map out all the different pathways and all the options around post-16, because what we're doing is we're increasing them on a regular basis. So we're making sure that that's really clear for everybody that's involved with the young people and their families, and again for those with an education, health and care plan and those without as well. We've also got a preparing for adulthood forum set up, and that involves parents and carers, colleagues from schools, from the college, from other settings, from adults and from health, all working together about what we need to do around transition and improve transition going forward. For those students with an education, health and care plan, from year 9 onwards, so from around age 14, what we do is when we have those annual reviews, the outcomes will be kind of incorporated into the education, health and care plan, which focus on what they need to achieve to prepare for adulthood and what support's required. So we do have a real focus on that. It'll start at year 9 and continue right through their journey into adulthood as well. And what we have done as well in Wakefield is we've had 2 really successful supported internship schemes running for some time now, one with the hospital and one with Next. Obviously, COVID's had an impact on that, but we're continuing to increase our offer around that. So we're working, the council's agreed to have some supported internships within the local authority, and we're working with Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, who's agreed as well. And we're also doing some work with prospects about having some kind of bespoke offers available to young people as well. And we've got a member of the team that works, and we call it kind of supporting the 5-day offer. So that's working with young people and the families about what that bespoke offer needs to look like for that particular young person, and how can we support them to get to where they need to be. I will pause there because I know we're short on time, and I'm not seeing any questions in the comments so far?
There's no questions coming up. I'm just going to thank you for that, Julie. And I'm very aware of the time, and we are lagging behind a bit. So all I can say is thank you very much for a very detailed presentation. And as we've got no questions, I think it'd be good to move now to Eamon Mohans, who's Service Manager, Youth Offending Team and Youth Services. So thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Hi. As mentioned, I'm Eamon Mohans. I'm the service manager for the youth offending team and youth services, and I have responsibilities for my team do for any young people when sentenced to look within their within the currency of their order or sentence to see if they will be 18 during that period. What we do then is we've got robust arrangements between the yacht and probation to support the transition from youth justice services to adult provision when a young person is on a court order or coming to a sentence in custody. There's strong local and national guidance and policies that are in place between ourselves and the probation service, and we have within the yacht a seconded probation officer who has a responsibility to support transitions. This is led to risk and needs and the vulnerabilities that are shared between the transfer plan that's put in place. So when a young person is on a court order, as I said, we make sure that we plan in advance. Certainly at least 6 months, sometimes 9 months before they reach the age of 18, and the transition begins at that earliest opportune time. We're not waiting for the last minute to transfer, and having the probation in situ is probation officer is really helpful because it joins things up really well. So the transition is tailored according to the risks of the young person and their needs, and that we have a maximum of 2 to 3 joint meetings with the young person before case management responsibilities transition. This allows the relationship to build, and I think Stephen alluded it to the beginning, to keep engagement strong and stop young people kind of falling off the edge, if you like, and not engaging. So it's important that engagement remains strong and that there is a relationship built between the young person, the youth offending team, and then as they transition across into probation. So for those, it doesn't automatically stop at the point of 18. Again, it's about where the needs are and where the assessments tell us that we would continue to work in this way until a clear kind of handover happens seamlessly and agreed. There are obviously within the youth offending team, we've got specialist workers who can also be the conduit between from health. From CAMS into adult services as well. So it's about keeping those conduits strong. Again, also a key thing is about the public protection side of things. So again, working closely with the police and our multi-agency public protection arrangements, if there are any kind of significant concerns, again, that this is done in a collaborative, fair and managed way. In relation to Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation, they are due or were due in June to come and do a thematic inspection on transitions. However, they've postponed that now until later in the year. But again, what's strong there is certainly across West Yorkshire, where I sit with the other 4 respective yacht managers across the district, we are looking for good practice. So when any inspectorate teams come, we look across our service areas to see what we're doing well, how we might improve. And we would always, build a good, strong action plan to respond to the any thematic inspectorate in relation to transitions. We also have accountability within our youth offending team yacht management board, which Beate chairs. Again, where we've got strong representation from probation, where the mechanisms are in place to make sure that transitions are done smoothly, effectively, to meet the needs of the young person, but also, as mentioned, the public protection arrangements. And that's it from me. I'll hand back over to Stephen unless there are any questions specific.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't think we have any questions. Is there anybody who wants to raise anything with Eamon?
Okay.
Okay.
Right, over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, this is our last slide, colleagues, and just to highlight some of the work that we're taking forward, some of the next steps. I'll take the first 2 bullet points, and then I think Julie will come in and finish off with the last 2 bullet points. So I guess one of the themes that's run across our input this morning has been the importance of how partnerships and services work together. So one of the things we've agreed at a partnership governance level is that we will establish a transition pathways strategic group chaired at a corporate director level by Beata, and involving chief officers and director level staff from across health, social care, education and inclusion. Very much a focus on transition, reassuring that we've got robust arrangements in place, but also where we need to strengthen things, where we need to develop and strengthen existing arrangements, and opportunity to have oversight and drive that forward. So that's a key next step. The second key next step is some of the work we're doing at a neighbourhood or locality area basis, particularly thinking here around children post 16, children that might not be picked up through other formal planning arrangements, whether that's team around the school or they're subject to any other sort of formal plan. Potentially about how we might use our neighbourhood coordination group meetings in each of our locality areas. The groups that come together with colleagues from across health, education, policing, WDH, very much to make sure we're putting where we've got concerns, where a young person needs additional support in their transition and progression to adulthood, that we're putting a partnership support plan in place. And we've commenced discussions with colleagues within the Community Directorate of the Council and the police and WDH to take forward that improvement. So that's first 2. I'll let Julie finish off with the last 2 bullet points there as next steps.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as we said, this is just a bit of a snapshot because there's an awful lot going on around transitions. It's certainly embedded into this end strategy as we go forward, so there's lots of work going on. But a couple of things that we wanted to just highlight here is there's a joint project that's going on with Next Steps team and adults around a small group of young people to move them into supported living accommodation prior to them becoming 18, with a remit of the assessment for adult social care needs and the independent skills. So that's going to, we're expecting the first young person to move in during the month of April. It's for 3 young people, and they will have kind of overnight support. Somebody will be sleeping in the unit with the young people as well. And that's a joint venture between children's and adults. So that's really good news. And then the other thing that we're looking at, again, working with adult services as well, is we're doing a review of the short breaks provision for children and young people with special educational needs. And as part of that, we're looking at potentially if we can open up Wasdale, allowing maybe a couple of nights a week that would be open up to young people from age 18 to 25 from adult services. That would meet a kind of a gap in or pressure in services from adult services, and it would also be in line with what families and young people have told us around the cliff edge, and the fact that that would be, you know, if somebody, they could stop there till they were 19 or 20 in some cases, that would ease that pressure that all kind of mounts on them at one point in time. So not finalised yet, but we're definitely working with adult services to try and explore that and hopefully kind of progress that as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. There's no questions, and given the time, I think we probably do need to move forward. But Cynthia's saying she has to leave now, so thanks, Cynthia, for letting us know. What I would just like to ask, though, is could a copy of that presentation be sent out to members of the committee, please?
Yeah, we'll share that with Lynn and make those arrangements, Celia.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So I think we do need to move on. We've got to agenda item number 8, and it's Vicky Schofield, Service Director, Children's Social Care, who will be reporting on the quarterly quality assurance report. So over to you, Vicky.
Okay, colleagues, I'm going to try and share my screen, which is a thing that fills me with dread because I'm not very technologically competent. So just please bear with me and I'll do my very best. Can you let me know when you can see anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that now?
It's coming up, but it's quite small for me. Oh, that's better. That's okay. Thank you.
Marvellous. Okay, very good. The difficult bit done. So I'm mindful of time, colleagues, and you have something very similar to this every quarter. So I'll run through it relatively quickly, and then invite you to ask any questions that you've got. So just a quick reminder, I think we all know that quality assurance is very important now. It tells us what we do well and what we do less well, and helps us then to focus the improvement work and learning activity. A reminder of our process for you. We have multiple ways of looking at our work. So we report in detail to you on those full audits, which take place in relatively small number, about 25 cases every 6 weeks, which are audited and then moderated, and really give us that benchmark around sort of where practice quality sits in the organisation. But sitting behind that, there are very many other pieces of QA work, which include dip samples and also quality assurance work carried out by our conference chairs and reviewing officers, and across the partnership, so involving our team managers, service managers, heads of service and colleagues from police, health and education. And then what you can see there is something around volume. It gives you the sense of what we've done in the previous year and then over the 3 quarters of this year in terms of the number of cases that we've actually sampled. So you can see that this year we are well on track to have sampled more cases than we did last year, and that we think is relatively representative. So for this last quarter, thematic areas that were considered, and this list is not exhaustive, but included supervision. We had a look at unaccompanied asylum seeking children coming to the attention of the local authority, and the majority coming into care. We looked at children who've been admitted to care in the last 3 months. We also looked at children who had been in need and receiving services for 15 months plus, to get a sense of what we were doing that was making a difference, and any additional sort of activity that was necessary. We have continued to look at re-referrals, and we always look at contacts with an outcome of no further action recorded, to check our decision making and activity in those cases. We have looked at children in the last quarter who have been on child protection plans for a second or subsequent time, children who have had their child protection plans ceased in the last 6 months, and children who've been on child protection plans for more than 15 months. And that's really because the data tells us that things are shifting in Wakefield around child protection planning. Our numbers of children on child protection plans have reduced from a significant peak of over 600, but we now look much closer to statutory neighbours, and what we want to be clear about is that we're getting those decisions right. So that's the reason for some focus in that area. And that just sets out the focus and volume of audit activity in a slightly different way. So you can see there how much of each of those areas we looked at during the last quarter. Okay, moving on.
Oh.
Sorry, did you want to?
No, it's okay. It's all right.
Okay. So the findings then from those 50 cases that were audited in detail are set out there for you, and you can see, probably similar to previous months, we've got a relatively even split now around outturns that land in the requires improvement range and outturns that land in the good range. So we obviously want to see increasingly higher outturns at good than requires improvement. But just to remind colleagues where we were when we started this improvement journey, we had about a third of our work which was outturning as inadequate, and very limited evidence of good work. So we know that we're moving in the right direction here, and the QA work, as I say, helps us to look at the areas in more detail where we know we need to focus improvement activities still. And then this just breaks down those findings further. So you can see there in terms of the audits carried out in November and December, the particular areas where we found better and less good practice. So in the green there shows the good outturns, the red is the inadequate, and the requires improvement is the yellow. And what you'll see, I think, in December, although it is in very small number, there is some evidence of outstanding practice in a couple of those cases, in a few areas, in particular around case recording, assessment activity, and identification of risk. So you can see there where we think we're doing better and where we think we're doing less well. What I'm really pleased about is that that last column, if you can see there, is about the extent to which children are being supported to achieve better outcomes. And that's what we're really focusing on through all of our work, that we move children from a place which is less good to a place which is better. And what we can see there is that increasingly we're showing evidence of good practice, so that we are helping children to get to a better place. And that's really what it's all about for me. So hopefully that's helpful. And then just moving on in terms of the overarching outturn for the QA work for this quarter, you can see slightly down in terms of the good outcomes on last month, but the overarching trend we're still pretty confident around, which tells us that we are sort of month on month, quarter on quarter, embedding better practice, I guess. The overarching trend is upward with a significant reduction in inadequate outcomes. Just a reminder around governance. Obviously, we produce the QA report quarterly. That's presented to various boards, including the Improvement Board and your summary here, so that we keep this visible. And a reminder that we use then that activity in order to drive learning and specific focuses within the services. And again, these are the areas that we're particularly focused on right now. Some of this Beata alluded to earlier when she talked about the improvement plan. Kerry's also mentioned life story work this morning for children in care, and a focus on reduced placement disruption and increased stability for children in their placements. Neglect, domestic abuse and adolescent risk are big ticket items for us, and they really are not just for us as social workers, but also for early help and across the partnership in Wakefield, so that we really are able to deal with those issues of accumulative harm, those things that impact on children over time and are not without challenge, I guess, in finding solutions for. And then by way of summary, lots of this I've said before, the process is very well embedded now. We think the QA process is robust. The feedback generally around this is positive. There is evidence that the trajectory is upward in terms of good practice. But again, I think what will really help us with that now is as we move hopefully out of the pandemic and towards people being more present more of the time in groups, so that we can really begin to build on some of the learning activity that we've had in place, but hopefully do more of that in person and face to face, which is what's required for us now to get to that next stage. So I'm very happy, colleagues, if you've got questions to answer those, and I'll try and take the presentation down if I can.
Are there any questions from
Has that gone
councillors?
for everybody? Has that gone?
Yes, it's gone, yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah. Are there any questions from committee members? Okay, I mean, all I can say is it appears that positive progress is being made, and despite the the pandemic, that we're keeping on track, which is great news to hear. So we'll move now, if that's okay with you, Vicky, to the vital signs report, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
So colleagues have got this in the packs again, and again, this is a document that you're very familiar with, so I'm proposing to run through this pretty quickly too, but again, answer any questions if you've got them. I think what you can see from this is that, generally speaking, performance has sustained or improved in the last in the timescale to which this relates. The only area that I might draw your attention to in particular where there's been a slight decline is in relation to assessment timeliness, which I believe is on, bear with me, KPI 2, which is the green line there, that looks as though we're now between about 70 and 80% for assessments completed within 45 working days. What I can tell you, colleagues, is that we've interrogated that in some detail, and we understand that that dip relates to 2 particular teams who experienced pretty high levels of sickness absence in relation to COVID in the timescale that this relates to, in addition to a small turnover of agency social workers. We are confident that that's now resolved itself, and we've also had significant success in recruitment activity, which will land over the next 2 to 3 months. So we are confident that we won't see this decline sustained. The rest of the KPIs that the document sets out for you, I think you'll see are a pretty good news story, actually. The visiting timeliness is very positive, where we've got children on child protection plans being seen very regularly in almost every case, and where we don't do that, we know which those children are and what the exceptions relate to. Very often that's about children who have moved out of the area. The timeliness of supervision and provision of supervision, both on a case-based and personal basis, is very positive and as high as we've seen. I've just spoken to you in detail about the quality assurance outturn, so I don't propose to do that again. I'm very happy to take any questions if people have got them.
Any questions from members? I don't think there are any. I just had one myself, actually. It's relating to the KPI 2. And it's a comment regarding the child protection conference system, and basically saying that you'd achieved a target of 80% being on time, which is really very good. But I'm just wondering how much support there is in terms of admin support for social workers when they have to organise those, or if that, if you need more or what, to make sure that's improved, that percentage.
I think the subject of admin support for social workers is always one which presents challenges. The conferencing arrangements are actually pretty well resourced, though, it's the safeguarding unit rather than the social worker that does the lion's share of the arranging of the conferences, and that function is pretty well resourced in terms of administrative support. There is a look, I think, across the whole around how we organise administrative support, so that is in process. But where we do have a lapse in timeliness around case conferences, it's generally not about the logistical arrangements. It's more around things like the notification timescale. You'll know that we've got 15 days to carry out the conference from the point of the strategy discussion, which is sometimes pretty difficult because at that point people don't know often whether or not children need to be subject of a protection plan. So it's a very short time scale and one that's not easy to achieve, but we do it in the vast majority of cases. And as I say, where we don't do that, we understand why not. and can take action if needed.
Great.
But it's not about admin. That was a long
Okay.
response to a short question. So
Yeah.
the issue is not about administrative support.
Right. Okay. That's good to hear. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Vicky. I don't know if there's any other questions, last minute questions coming in, but I don't think there are any. So thank you. And we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 10, Corporate Parenting Committee Minutes. We're just looking at the overview and scrutiny monitor the effectiveness of the Corporate Parenting Committee by undertaking a quarterly review and receiving copies of the committee's minutes. The most recent copy of those is within your pack. The next quarterly review is due on the 7th of April, and I think there's going to be a meeting between the chair of this committee and the deputy, and with the chair of the Corporate Parenting Committee. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments that members want to make about that. If not, I'm going to move to item number 11 on the agenda, which is the Executive Leaders Forward Plan of Key Decisions, and that's agenda pages 37 to 41. It's a scrutiny's role to hold the decision makers to account by reviewing the leaders' forward plan and having an input into decisions before they are taken. Although there are 6 key decisions on the current forward plan listed as relevant to the committee, 4 of these were taken by Cabinet last month. And so this leaves 2 decisions which are due to be taken later this month, one regarding Stop Smoking Specialist Service and the other investing in our future. So I'm just wondering if any members have any comments or questions they want to ask about those. If not, I'm going to go to the final agenda item, the date and time of the next meeting, which I can tell you hasn't been agreed yet. It's not going to be done until sometime after the May elections. And I'd just like to thank all members of the committee, especially those who are leaving us, and ask that the cameras be turned off. Oh, hang on. Yes, I think Maureen is typing a message, so I don't know if this is a question that's coming in or a comment. She's just saying thank you, which is always nice to hear. So thanks very much to all the staff who've actually given so much to us this morning in terms of the presentations. And I would also like to thank everybody, because I've enjoyed being a part of this committee over the last 3 years, and I think tremendous progress has been made. And as an ex-social worker from years ago, I can just feel the real improvement that there is coming forward. So thank you very much. And with that, I think we can turn the cameras off if it's not already been turned off. And oh, actually, Andy's typing a message, so we'll just wait for him to finish. But he's saying thank you. So we'll leave it there. And can we turn the cameras off now if they've not already been turned off? Thank you, James.